So I'm just going to start by sharing a little story about my life. It was October 18th, 2014. I just finished swimming some laps at the pool, and my kids had just finished their swimming lessons, when suddenly my phone rang with an out-of-province number. And although I don't usually answer the phone when it's a number that I don't recognize, something compelled me to take this call. And in an instant, my life was turned upside down entirely. "Is this Lindsay Lapaquette?" asked a voice. "I'm calling from the Ontario Provincial Police. There's been an accident." These are the words that changed my life forever. You see, my mom and my uncle had been traveling that day from Toronto to Montreal to visit us for my daughter's 3rd birthday party. Suddenly, I went from having plans of going out for a family dinner to no longer having the family that I had always known. The officer informed me that my uncle had died at the scene and that my mom was in critical condition and being airlifted to Ottawa. Just a couple hours later, as we were driving to the hospital in Ottawa, I got another phone call telling me that my mom had also succumbed to her injuries. Life can change entirely in a heartbeat. Just 2 years later, I got a similar phone call from a neighbor informing me that my dad had also died suddenly. I had yet to turn 40, and somehow I had gone from having never even attended a funeral to having lost 6 members of the next generation and having no parents. The past few years have challenged me at the deepest emotional layers as I've struggled to deal with this curveball that life had thrown me, all the while raising 2 young children who both have special needs. In the weeks that followed the accident, I really questioned if I'd ever be able to feel happy again. I wondered if I'd ever be able to let go of the fear and the anxiety that now sat so deep in my soul. It was fear that came from the realization that bad things, they don't just happen to other people. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to be happy again. I feared that if I let myself feel happy, it could all, yet again, just be taken in an instant. I'm here today to talk to you guys about my journey with adversity so that we can all continue working to kick its ass. And although the examples that I'm giving you here today relate to death, everything that I'm saying here today relates to each and every one of you, even if you're not dealing with a big family crisis right now. We all have to deal with moments of adversity in our lives on a regular basis, big and small. So before I go any further, I'd like each of you to think of something you've had to deal with in your life, a moment of adversity you've dealt with, and I'd like you to keep this in your mind as I continue talking. We live in a society where resiliency is often seen as moving forward or bouncing back. People who go back to work immediately after a death are praised for their strength. People who have chronic, debilitating illnesses and injuries who keep going about life without making any accommodations are seen as being inspirational. People who finish marathons while nursing major injuries are praised for their tenacity. But what if we started to consider resiliency a little more differently? What if we started seeing strength in doing what you need to do in the moment to be okay regardless of what other people think? The people around me in my life after the accident kept encouraging me to just get back to my life. Get back to your life like it was before. That'll make you feel better. Guess what? That doesn't take away the pain. I knew somehow, deep down, that I needed to find a new way to exist in a world that I no longer knew how to exist in. And I needed to learn to do that one step at a time. So the first thing that I did was that I started cultivating stillness. There were no conclusive answers as to what had caused the accident. The memories, the questions, the what ifs. This kept me up half the night at first. What if I hadn't canceled that weekend trip away when they had said that they wanted to come visit? What if they had airlifted my mom right after the accident instead of an hour later? I needed to find a way to calm the constant chatter in my mind, or I knew that the fear and anxiety it was causing me was going to take me over completely. So I forced myself back to yoga, even though I dreaded going. The stillness of yoga made my pain so real. It was so difficult to just stay in that room and feel my pain. We often, whether it's conscious or not, we often fill our lives with busyness, with keeping ourselves busy doing things as a way to not let ourselves feel our pain. I knew I had to make myself sit with that pain, as terrible as it was. I knew that if I didn't sit with it, it would eat me alive forever. I knew if I shoved it down, it would come back to haunt me for the rest of my life. So I made sure that I took time to be still with my pain. And as I sat with my pain in my stillness became a place to recharge from, instead of a place to run from, like it had been. So I'd like to challenge each and every one of you to think of how you can incorporate moments of stillness into your life on a daily basis. This can be through meditation, through yoga, going for a walk, taking a bath, maybe sipping a hot tea in a quiet room. Find something that works for you, and then I challenge you to incorporate this time into your routine every single day, as a way to stay connected with your authentic voice. When we have time with ourselves in stillness, we live more in the present. We start to notice more our emotions and what we want and what we need. As Eckhart Tolle said, when you lose touch with inner stillness, you lose touch with yourself. And when you lose touch with yourself, you lose yourself in the world. So I wanted to talk to you about what our authentic voice is. Our authentic voice is knowing in our gut what we want and what we need. It's our intuition. It's staying out of our head. And it's so important that we connect really regularly with our authentic voice to know where we want to be going. Cultivating stillness allows us to be connected to this authentic voice. Do any of you guys know someone who asks 10 people their opinion every time they have a decision to make? Yeah, you're pointing to yourself. So I was just going to say, have any of you guys ever done that? Because I know I've been guilty of it at times. When I feel really unsure where I want to go, I take a poll. So that's what it looks like when we've lost touch with our authentic voice. We're asking everyone else to substitute their opinions of what we should do for our own recognition of what we want and what we need. So I want us to think now about little kids for a second. Do little kids do this? Do little kids debate for 5 minutes if they want the red cup or the blue cup? There's some parents in here, clearly. Do they ask 10 people if they should wear shorts or pants? No. Little kids know exactly what they want, and they're going to let us know it at the top of their voice. They're in tune with their authentic voice. So if we're born with this, what happens? Well, as we age, we're surrounded by people who tell us how we should act and how we should think and what the consequences of our decisions might be. They instill fear in us. I caught myself doing this with my son the other day. He wanted to skip out on a birthday party, and I caught myself from saying, "Oh, maybe you might not get invited next year." And I had to stop myself and say, no, don't teach him to ignore his needs for fear of not being invited. It becomes so natural. And then we lose touch with our authentic voice. So as I was becoming more in touch with my authentic voice, I started saying no to anything that didn't also say yes to myself first. So this came in many different ways for me. I started saying no to going to parties and big gatherings after the accident, even though my friends would beg me. They thought that would be good for me. I knew it would drain me. I'd say no to that, and I'd spend that time instead at the gym or going to coffee with a friend or for a walk with a friend. I started giving myself permission to back out of commitments last minute when the wave of grief would knock me over again out of nowhere, and I'd spend that time doing self-care instead. I chose to close a thriving business that I loved because I knew that I needed time to heal and that keeping it open wasn't allowing me the time I needed. And then after the death of my father, I chose to step away from a business with a very good friend when I realized that our needs were very incompatible and that staying with her wasn't being authentic to myself. So I would like you guys to think about something you have done in the past week, something you have said yes to that you really wish you had said no to. And I'd like you to think about what has held you back. Is it fear of failure? Is it fear of not being good enough? Are there financial fears? What is that thing that's holding you back? Because what I can tell you today is that if you're not saying no to the things that don't say yes to you first, the new doors that exist everywhere, the new opportunities around you, you won't be able to see them because you're going to be too busy running around doing all the things you wish you had said no to. As Paulo Coelho said, if you're brave enough to say goodbye, life will reward you with a new hello. Natalie was just talking about this. So what are these things in your life that you wish you wanted to be saying no to? And what do you need to do to get past your fears so you can say no, so you can start to walk through that new door? So that you can start to see that these other opportunities exist. What if, instead of saying yes, you simply said, thank you for thinking about me, but that doesn't work for me right now. Such a simple but hard thing to say. So I wanted to talk to you about my view of resiliency with an analogy to buckets. So I see resiliency as like a bucket that's full of water. And we engage in experiences and interactions with people that replenish us and rejuvenate us, and that helps to fill our bucket. And then sometimes we have experiences or interactions with people that take from our bucket. Those are the people that deplete us. And I view resiliency as being sure that we engage enough in experiences, life experiences, and interactions with people that we're keeping that bucket full. Because when we don't do that, our bucket slowly starts to drain. We end up cranky, impatient, easily frustrated. The water is draining from the bucket, and our resiliency is going with it. So for myself, I think I've known what activities nourish my soul for a very long time. But somehow, in the chaos of raising 2 young kids with special needs and running a full-time business, I had just slowly started making less space for these activities in my life. With the death of my parents and my bucket being close to empty, I made a huge shift in my priorities. I started to make sure that the first thing I did was to engage in these activities that nourish my soul so that my bucket wouldn't run dry. My husband and I started using babysitters more often to get out a bit more. My sister and I started camping extensively together throughout the summer. I was just talking to a woman in the washroom, and I now take about 12 to 16 weeks vacation a year because my priority is spending time with my family, not working, even though I love what I do. I started prioritizing reading over having a clean house, fitting in a workout instead of getting extra errands done, and serving the kids just oatmeal for dinner so that we go out for a ski after school. These are things I wouldn't have let myself do before until everything was checked off of the list. But I'd realized that if I don't do these activities regularly, my bucket was always close to being empty. And then this big event happens in my life, and there was nothing left. So I challenge you guys to think about what activities nourish your soul. Your activities might be entirely different than mine, but find things in your life that you truly enjoy and that leave you feeling rejuvenated. You have more energy and patience after doing them than before. Find these things and try to do them every single day. Try to have enough activities that you can fit it in even for 20 minutes a day. Something that nourishes your soul. And if you don't know what those activities are yet, go back to stillness and listen to your authentic voice. Listen to what you like. So for me, I would notice when I would feel angry and resentful. I would notice when I was feeling replenished, and I'd start to use those observations as my guide to see where I wanted to put my energy and where I didn't. So it's not just activities that we engage in that fill and drain our bucket, it's also the interactions with the people around us. So what I started noticing after the accident was that when my phone would ring, there were times I would move heaven and earth to trip over everybody to grab that phone. And there were times I wouldn't move and pretended I didn't hear it. I wasn't answering it for the life of me. And I started getting curious about why that was. What I started noticing was that there were some people that I hung out with who were really uncomfortable being around emotions. And now that I was in a very emotional state, I was very vulnerable, I was in a lot of pain, I wasn't okay with pretending that I was fine. Those people wanted me to pretend that I was fine. They wanted me to chit-chat about the weather and the World Cup, and guess what? I didn't care. And I was avoiding those phone calls because it drained me to have those conversations. So I started to spend much more time and effort making sure that I was constantly surrounded with people who I could have deep and meaningful connections with. I made sure to surround myself with people who accepted me for who I am, who let me be who I needed to be in the moment. People who I could talk about my biggest life troubles with, but could also talk about the biggest joys in life, not the people who I could only talk about the good things in life with. And I started to really focus on developing those relationships a lot more. And it's really brought me to a place where most of the interactions I have in my day now fill my bucket. I don't have those draining interactions anymore. I don't pretend anymore. I've now accepted that the people who reject me for not being who they need me to be in their life, or for whom I don't respond in the way that makes them feel comfortable, like I won't pretend that I'm okay if I'm not, I've started accepting that their rejection of me actually has nothing to do with me, and that I'm okay and I can move on. So one of the things that has been a big part of my journey has been not letting fear get in my way along this process, as we've talked about lots here today. So fear of feeling my emotions was keeping me from cultivating stillness, right? That's why I didn't want to walk in that yoga room. Fear of not producing enough, not being productive enough, not getting enough done, not being good enough, that was keeping me from engaging more in the activities that nourish my soul. And fear of rejection was keeping me from being authentic in all of my interactions. Do not let fear sit in the driver's seat of your life. I promise you, it will stop you from being the person who you want to become. I'd really like you to think about where those fears are coming from with you, and keep that message, keep those thoughts going as you leave here today. So I want you to take some time to write these questions down. What do you want more of in your life? What are the things that nourish your soul? What is missing? What is that thing that you want? And what is it that's holding you back? What if you realize that you feel fear, you acknowledge that fear, you let yourself feel that fear, and then you decided to go ahead and do it anyhow, to expose yourself to the chance of failure, to expose yourself to having to maybe feel those feelings. I promise you, you'll survive. As Oprah Winfrey said, death is a reminder to turn up the volume of your life. It doesn't matter how long we live, our days on earth are numbered. That is an absolute guarantee. Don't ever lose sight of that. It shouldn't have to take a tragedy or a death to realize that the experiences that we have every single day, they could all just be gone in an instant. Now is the time to turn up the volume in your life. Every day, every minute, every second, before it's too late. Thank you.
Lindsay Lapaquette.